Austin, welcome. And in fact, as I didn't write it out, maybe you could tell us exactly your organization, because I didn't have all the words of it here.
Right. So, NWJ, Community and Workers of Jamaica Cooperative Credit Union, we are the largest credit union by asset size in Jamaica. Not large compared to you. We have an asset base of roughly 150 million US dollars. We have a customer base of 144,000. And we have a savings portfolio of around 19 million Jamaican dollars, or an equivalent of 150 million for asset.
Wow. So very, very large.
I am the chairman and the president.
Excellent. Well, I think before we get into it, when we were preparing to do this panel, I was just so struck by your positive mindset. I wonder if we could talk a little bit about this philosophy of life. Why is a positive mindset so important in cooperative banking, but also particularly in a country like Jamaica, where for certain people externally, they might think it's very problematic, you can't really do business there?
Yes. So as you know, in Jamaica, our motto is no problem, which means we see every problem as an opportunity. But it's important that we have a positive mindset, because we are in a knowledge-driven world where mental health is now very, very important. I am firmly a man who believes in God. I love people. I also believe that we are in a culture where we need to learn, unlearn, and relearn. Mm-hmm. And our ability to do that will determine how we can be successful as an individual. How does this relate to the cooperative movement? The cooperative movement was started at the turn of the Industrial Revolution, where there were much displacement and people were going through hardship. Mm-hmm. We rose to that occasion and were able to address the need at that time. We survived 2 world wars and a pandemic, and now 2 pandemics. And we are now in an information revolution where we are seeing, as the advancement of technology, AI, gets prevalent, we are seeing similar displacement of workers. Jobs that were done by persons are now being replaced by automation, mm-hmm. and there's the risk of persons actually not having a living wage to survive. It's imperative that as a movement, we pay attention to what I call the 4 Ps. Mm-hmm. The 4 Ps are power, profit, purpose, and people. Mm-hmm. Power relates to our governance. How do we manage the governance structure? Profit. How do we equitably ensure that the profit we gain are distributed to our members and they feel a part of what we're getting and not get seduced by the need to maximize profit at the expense of our members? The next P is our people. The cooperative movement is about people helping people. And so we cannot forget that, because that is what causes us to exist. If we fail to put people at the front of our decision-making, then we will become just like banks. Yeah. And then finally, purpose. Why are we here? And that purpose should be the fuel and the passion that drives us to be here. When I look around and I see the brilliance of the people in this room, the custodian of the future of the movement, I feel encouraged. Mm-hmm. I feel encouraged that we need to ensure that flame is kept alive and relevant for the next generation. And so we have to ensure that we educate our members, those who are in governance, in management, of what the purpose means. Mm-hmm. Because if we fail to remind ourselves of this, we will get lost in all the changes that are taking place, and we may become irrelevant.
And particularly, we'll get lost in this whole kind of profit motive, profit at all cost. But it's interesting, because you're talking there about education for people to be clear about the purpose, but also education is particularly important in this technological change. You've already mentioned technology-driven economy we're in. It can be a bit bewildering, the pace of change. How are you trying to use education as a tool to help address this, particularly so it doesn't have those negative impacts you've been talking about?
Very important, because as again, we are in a knowledge-driven world where, again, technology is driving every aspect of our lives. And we are also faced in an environment where there's disinformation, there's misinformation. Information is coming to us at the speed of light. We are processing it at the speed of man. Yeah. We are now the bottleneck. And so we have to find a way to ensure that especially for those who have been around before the takeoff of the information age, how they can transition into the new. And also position ourselves for the digital natives, the millennials and the Gen Zs and the Generation Alphas, who will be born into technology and only know the Googles and the Facebooks and those things that we see now. And also to ensure that we have them around the table in the decision-making process.
Yeah.
We cannot have a situation where we have the decision makers being people who are outside of where the technology is going. We need to embrace the youth in our decision making so that when we take those decisions, they can embrace it because they will be part of the change.
Absolutely. And how do you go about engaging youth? Because this is what is so critical. It's interesting, we've now gone on to Generation Alpha. It's going to be Beta, Gamma, Delta, who knows? I'm still clinging on to my Gen X. Yes. I think I'm a Gen X. Maybe I'm a millennial. I'd like to believe I am anyway. Maybe I can get away with that in a bar. Yes. But ultimately, yes, what can we do to engage the youth in particular? Because you're talking here partly about governance and strategy, but also you're talking about drawing on them as a resource who understands the innovation that's going on.
Yes, you know, I was talking to Eric last night, and he's an educator, and I am just thinking that we need to bring back cooperative economics in our teaching for the young.
What do you mean by cooperative economics then, as opposed to traditional Adam Smith hardcore economics?
Because the profit maximization seems to be the drive of today. And you see this great disparity between the super rich and the super poor, because there's no space in between. It's either you're very rich or you're very poor. And that type of polarization creates a lot of social displacement and unrest. And as a cooperatives, our responsibility is to ensure that we are in touch with our communities, that we don't have marginalization of the people that we serve, that we don't have people who feel they cannot contribute to their communities and their families and their economy. That presentation that we just had a while ago was so well in capturing the spirit of what we need to have. But we cannot take it for granted. We have to keep ensuring that that gets into the mind of the young, because we're in an attention economy where everything is battling for the mind of the young. And we need to ensure that we carve out time to remind them of what the cooperative spirit is, because they are going to be the future to take us into the next 100 years.
Sure. And can you give any specific examples of what you're trying to do in Jamaica to engage youth in this and have them involved in your thinking and strategy making?
Yes. So we have a youth arm in the credit union movement where we get them involved in the planning. We also have in schools, in the high schools, we have the thrift clubs where we start getting back to those basics to get people understand the importance of savings. We also are looking at how we get the youth in the boardroom. They may not be able to make decisions, but we can observe them and get into a mentorship program where young and upcoming bright persons who want to serve, that we who are experienced in the field take them on and do mentorship with them, so that when they do start to perform, they come with a body of knowledge from the expertise built up from persons who have practiced this and off in a smooth way.
Absolutely, and I must say, I think this is something I would like to see introduced more broadly. When I think about what I studied at school, I was lucky to get a good education. I studied economics, but no one taught me how to use a credit card, or even more importantly, never to use a credit card, okay? Stuff like that. That just happened after I left school, and it took me quite a while after university to clean that all up.
Yes.
So of course, education and youth, but maybe the other thing is looking more broadly with the cooperative movement, of course. A lot of it is, in fact, about strategic partnerships.
Yes.
And it's interesting, there's a saying. They say that competition makes better products, but partnerships make better companies. Yes. And is that all the case that partnerships make better cooperative banks as well?
Yes. And unfortunately, as a cooperative, we have not been living up to that mantra of cooperation among cooperatives. I think one of the earlier speakers spoke to that we operate like a honeycomb. We all have our little unique area that we operate, but for us to be effective in the future, we have to pool. The knowledge that we have in this room is tremendous, but how much do we deliberately create the opportunity to share knowledge as we're doing here. We need to do more of this so that we can learn together. And as a movement, we will not be able to do everything ourselves. And that's not our purpose either. We need to stay focused on what our purpose is. But if technology has gotten to an extent where we may need to partner with entities who are favorably disposed to our mission, and we can create centers of excellence to offer certain services better than we could do it in-house, we need to look at those kind of strategic partnerships.
Could you give an example is there a particular strategic partnership that you have or you would like to have in Jamaica that you think could deliver this kind of synergy?
So we have been looking at back office processing. Every credit union has their own banking system. And they go through the pains of upgrades and all of that. And some credit unions don't have the capital to outfit themselves to be fit and proper, given what the regulatory requirement is, especially as it relates to know your customer and data security, and all the requirements now that we have to meet to be a fit and proper entity to operate. And some credit unions that are small will not be able to do this on their own. And so there is the need for us to find entities that can support that back office processing and ensure that we focus on the service delivered to our members. You know, the airline industry has done that very well. You know, pretty much all the planes are either Airbus or Boeing.
Yeah.
But you outfit the interior and the customer service to suit, you know, your particular business. And so we shouldn't be getting tied up with too much of the complexity that drags the resources into areas that we could outsource to partners that can do it better than us.
Absolutely, and that's so much about an efficient model as well. Well, I wonder if we can touch on another issue as well, and this gets to the socio-economic impact that we have of cooperative banking. You've mentioned this problem that we have with inequality. It's present everywhere in the world. And in fact, you could even say in the developed markets, it's even more shocking. But you go to developing markets as well, you see luxury housing, and the wall on the other side, you have people living in a favela or something like that, perfectly normal, or it's becoming normalized as well. So what do you think cooperative banks can do to actually narrow this gap, to actually foster sustainable growth as well, and help the marginalized? Because the current banking system sure isn't doing that.
Yes, and funny enough, that was how the cooperative movement was started. Certainly in Jamaica, it was started in 1941 by a Catholic priest. He saw marginalization, low wages, and the extortion from the loan sharks who were really preying on these marginalized people. And hence, he encouraged them to start the credit union movement. Somehow, I think we have departed a bit from this, and we have seen the loan sharks have now started to re-emerge. Yeah. Because the credit union or the cooperative movement is not meeting the needs of the marginalized. To some extent, it has to do with the regulation of know your customer. Some of them they don't have a fixed address. They don't have proper ID, and as a result, doing business is difficult. They have to do everything in cash. That costs a lot to transact business. They have to go in line and join to pay their bills because they cannot do it online. And so there is an opportunity for us as a movement to get back into these marginalized communities and educate these people about the need for them to come on board, to be able to transact business and to be able to use their time effectively so that they can conduct their business. But I also believe that there is a need for us to give back to these communities to help them to help themselves. And it means that we may have to offer certain loans to these communities at a concessionary rate to help them to get back on board, rather than to use this straight line approach where we find that they may not qualify for a loan, and hence they go to the loan sharks.
Exactly. No, it's so interesting because also increasingly with digitalization, we're seeing digital loan sharks as well in that sense. I think it's very interesting what you say as well, this fact that it's like it's expensive to be poor. If you don't have a proper fixed address or ID, you can't get the kind of banking. You have to be in cash. You end up having to pay more. Yeah. But when I was working at EcoBank, I thought one fascinating approach is that because increasingly everyone has a mobile phone, even people who are marginalized. In fact, they got the agreement of the regulator in Nigeria that they said, if we can track your GPS, if we can see every day between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. and you're in the same place, that's your home, and we can use that. So there are approaches, aren't there, to try and get around this issue of lack of KYC.
Yes, and actually technology has become so pervasive that in Jamaica, believe it or not, we have a population of 3 million, and we have more than 3 million mobile phones in Jamaica. So clearly, the opportunity is there for us to help these people to utilize the technology to make their lives better. And that's an exercise that we have to continuously work with the service providers and also with the new players like the fintechs who are using mobile phone as a service delivery to help some of these marginalized to come on board.
And in fact, that's actually where a lot of mobile banking comes from. If you think back to the big success in Kenya, M-Pesa, which is a payment platform which now has something like 40% of GDP goes through it, it was originally created so that it was possible for people to make microloan repayments. But they immediately discovered that people were paying each other. And they're like, maybe we should do P2P. So it's true, technology can really change the game there, can't it?
Thank you.
Maybe one final question we have time for is this other question about governance. If we want to deliver on this commitment, you said that deliver to the youth out there, deliver to the marginalized, etc., there needs to be sound governance. And you've actually been involved in board governance transformation.
Yes.
So what has that taught you about what needs to be done in terms of governance for the cooperative movement to be successful and to deliver these gains we want?
I believe the major challenge we have with governance right now is the need for us to ensure we have a robust succession planning in place. COVID has taught us one thing, that just like commodities, we have a shelf life.
Yeah.
And so we cannot take for granted that this chairman or this person on the board is going to be around forever. We have to be very systematic in how we recruit, or we select, or we train, or we retrain, or we evaluate, or we retire members of the board. And the board should be a living entity, And we do a great job at managing institutions, but as a board, we don't do a good job at managing ourselves.
Yeah.
Because we have ego, we have pride, and we have a lot of these things that get in the way, where sometimes we don't look beyond the fact that we may not be around, anything in the day now.
Yeah.
Many of us here, we have survived COVID. For what reason? Not to just carry on as business as usual, but to recognize that there's the need for us now to be urgently focused on how can we ensure that we have a legacy that will live on beyond us. How can we ensure we have talents that we are recruiting to take the baton to the next level? Mm-hmm. Many of us have done a great job in getting the institution to this far. We need to ensure that at the governance level, we have that structure and framework that will guarantee the future of the cooperative movement. Because if we fail to be custodians of this very important institution, then we would have done humanity a disservice. Because this was started out of the need to care for humanity who are going through suffering. And if we fail, then we'll be taken over by the big banks and the big techs. And we who have started this whole movement of inclusion and diversity will not have sufficient voice anymore. So I believe that we have the talent, we have the people, we have the passion, and we just need to keep that fire going so that we can create a future that will last beyond us.
Absolutely. I mean, very inspirational. It really is about future-proofing in every sense. Future-proofing the actual board, but actually future-proofing the mentality and the strategy as well.
Yes.
That's wonderful. Well, I'm afraid we're out of time, so thank you so much, Austin. I'm very glad to know that you're going to be hanging around, because I'm sure we could have talked the entire afternoon. And also, Austin got me a really nice present from Jamaica as well, some fantastic coffee. I'm looking forward to checking that out as well. So, Austin, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.